I wonder. Well, it matches my shirt. The house of the unconscious, the house of the unknown, the house of karma, the house of hidden enemies. Well, in Jungian psychology, the unknown and the unconscious. Well, there's the collective unconscious. And what's in there, there's all kinds of scary things in there. All kinds of stuff that happens when you have trauma, when you have abuse. And things go back to the back of your unconscious mind. And then when that happens, I don't know, behaviors happen. Abnormal behaviors, like people who have bipolar disorder, people who have what's called the split-off effect. It's like when you have, multiple trauma from your childhood, and then what happens is that your conscious mind can't handle the onslaught of, and the overwhelm of what the hell you just saw or what happened to you. Where does it go? Where does it go? I mean, there's this thing called a split-off where Dr. Donald Kalsched, he's a Ph.D. in Psychologist, and you can find him here on YouTube, but he tells the story of a little girl who the mother said to go tell the father that it was time for supper. And so the little girl goes into the room where the father was, but then she comes back to the mother, crying and saying that the angel said that I can't go into the room. She goes back to the mother, and she comes back. The mother says, what are you talking about? Go tell your father it's time for dinner. And she goes back and goes back to the father, comes back to the mother, and tells the mother again that the angel told me that I can't go into the room. Now, the mother is now suspecting that something's wrong, and she goes into the room where the father is, and he died in the chair. And his drink, had fallen to the ground. To the floor. And what Dr. Kalsched is explaining to the audience is that the mind, the girl's mind, created this part of herself, or this, it's a creation of the mind. And it was there to protect the little girl from the overwhelm of going in there and, really seeing that her father wasn't here anymore. Not a happy story. But all of this stuff happens this is 12th house stuff. This is 12th house stuff, and there are psychologists who are astrologers, and they write, they write articles, online. They write books, and I just bought his book. I bought it years and years ago. He is a psychiatrist, and as soon as I think of his name, I will tell you. Well, gee, look here. I found it. This book's title is The Sign of Mental Illness, and it was written by Mitchell E. Gibson, M.D., psychiatrist. I'm not going to go into the story in this video about how he, went from believing that astrology was bullshit to becoming an astrologer. Okay, back to the 12th house. Um, the 12th house. I was listening to a vlog by an individual who used to suffer from bipolar disorder, and the way he likens the 12th house, well, the unconscious, the a person's unconscious, and I'm comparing it to astrology, of course, but he likens the unconscious mind to this. And some of you might have seen this if you've taken psychology. The iceberg that you see, pushing up out of the ocean, but beneath the tip of the iceberg is this huge ocean. This vlogger is saying that there are people walking around who, they have maybe a jellyfish might be swimming around down there, or, nothing really terrible. But then there are other people who have all kinds of sea monsters under there. And that people who are dealing with things like PTSD, dealing with complex PTSD, and the difference between PTSD and complex PTSD is that PTSD is a one-time event that traumatized you. Complex PTSD is multiple traumas experienced in one's childhood. And you might want to check out Dr. Langberg. I forgot her first name. I'll leave a link or an annotation on the video so that you can find her videos if you're interested. She is a Christian, so for those of you who don't want the religion, don't worry about it. I mean, she is really, really good. If you want to listen to it, listen to it. Okay. This vlogger, I think that the example, the way that he explained this was beautiful, and it's perfect because it is true. Now, in astrology, of course, that 12th house, that collective unconscious is the 12th house. And when you have planets like Pluto posited in that house, hopefully there aren't any planets on the other side aspecting it. But if it happens to be your moon is in opposition to Pluto and posited in your 12th house, a lot of people would think, oh, that's great. Oh, wow, that must mean you're psychic. Not necessarily. Some people, again, you've got the waters that are just pretty much clear. There's not really much swimming around down there, indicating that the person, is not carrying around a weight even within themselves because of trauma, because of things that happened, and one of the things that Dr. Kalsched explained about trauma that overwhelms in childhood and in adulthood, because like some of the people at 9/11, they couldn't remember what happened, and they had to go through all this therapy, and then finally they came to a place where they could remember. But the trauma hits, and it goes straight to the unconscious. For some people, their life path isn't demanding that they really deal with what happened, and there are those of us who are called to task. And the way that it looks in this reality, in this existence, it takes on the form of mental illness. The bipolar disorder, the different types of PTSD, the different levels of it, It might even be a depression that is just so heavy, and people can't tell you to snap out of it. I mean, it's a clinical depression, but it's really heavy. I mean, you can end up in a depressive state where you literally can't get out of bed, and you become like catatonic. That's an individual carrying a really heavy load, a really heavy weight. It shows up as, you know, if you think of Howie Mandel, the comedian, actor, and Idol, whatever he does on Idol. You know, why does he have to protect himself? Why does he have to? Okay, according to this, I have 27 minutes left. Sorry about that. I left off with how the unconscious protects people and children experiencing trauma that is so overwhelming that it just automatically, you know, goes back here, and it shows up in behaviors. It shows up as breakdowns. It shows up as disorders. This is all 12th house stuff. And you've got something like Pluto posited in your 12th house, and your moon is in opposition to Pluto. Moon opposite Pluto also can represent a lot of things. I just want to say that it can represent the person who was somehow abandoned by the mother, and it doesn't have to be a physical abandonment, but it is severe, and it does create psychic pain, you know, significant psychic pain. Back to this 12th house, this house of the unknown, this house of the unconscious, and the archetypal energies. I mean, what happens when a person happens to be, you know, a Cancer moon, you know, one of the water people, or even a Scorpio moon, and they have this Pluto aspect, this moon Pluto aspect, this opposition. You know, does the trauma make a person susceptible to psychic terrorism? I mean, if they've had a religious upbringing that was negative and about mind control, and you know, they were fed a steady diet of fear and terror and Armageddon and hellfire and, you know, all of that. That's what's going in here. And you've got planets in your 12th house, and those planets are opposing your moon. It's a perfect recipe for a person to have phobias. Now, I don't know what happened to Howie Mandel. I have no idea how he was brought up, or what happened, or why he has this extreme OCD where he has to constantly protect himself from his environment. I don't know what happened to him. He just talks about the fact that he has it, and, you know, having to constantly use hand sanitizer and constantly, you know, wash his hands, and he, you know, can't be here and he can't be there, and he's got to have a house, you know, on his property separate from his family's house because he can't deal with the germs. I mean, it could be something that he came in from a past life with, or it could be something that happened in his childhood that he just doesn't talk about. You know, there are people who do come out and talk about, you know, childhood abuses, and, you know, that celebrities that come out. In ordinary life, there are people who join support groups, and, you know, they're really on a mission to heal from, you know, what ails them. You know, taking a spiritual path, you know, to do that, hopefully to heal versus escapism, although not all escapism is bad. There are psychologists who agree that some people are better off. Because we all have a different moon sign. The moon sign is different. I mean, fire sign people, okay. We all have a different moon sign. And whatever's going on in the chart, if we've got, you know, a really, like one astrologer said to a friend of mine that she came in to do the hardest work. She wasn't one of these bullshit new age astrologers where, oh, everything's love and light and rainbows and you're going to be a star and you have all this, you know. Look around the globe. I mean, take a realistic look around the globe. But we live in the land of opportunity. Yeah, that's true. But there were people who were born into collectives where in order to even reach a place of success, they don't have access in this country, in this land of opportunity. Their collective, the collective that they're entangled with, you know, they're in ignorance. And, you know, we really are molded and shaped by where we come from. And if if we don't have access to seeing how other people live, or I mean, not on television, I mean, seeing it. If you don't have access to it, and see, so many people take that for granted. They figure, well, you know, what's their problem? You know, yes, it's the mind, but if that mind isn't able to see a different way or a different life, how is that person supposed to even know any better? But there you are, maybe you were poor, but, you know, because of the places that you had access to, you know, you were able to, you know, get that light bulb effect. You know, the thing where, like, back in the day when Beavis and Butthead, you know, were on TV, and then, you know, the light bulb thing. But yeah, the whole light bulb effect is able to happen because they're poor. Like in the movie, in the book, From Homeless to Harvard. I mean, her mother was a heroin addict, the father was an alcoholic, and even though she was living, you know, in a slum, she was still getting on the train and seeing, you know, other life happening around her. It's not like she was secluded somewhere. You know, there are places in America that are poor and secluded. But she was in New York, and she was going to school with kids who, you know, were of different socio-economic backgrounds, you know. And she was also, she had access to teachers and, I mean, there's so many complexities to people. There's so many complexities. We can't just say, well, if I did something, then that person over there could do it. I mean, it's not correct. Okay, so I went way off on a tangent. I want to get back to this whole house of spirits. Okay, these archetypal energies can behave like the spirits of religion. A person, for example, who has a mother complex. When I first heard the term mother complex, I was thinking of somebody who had an obsession with being around their mother all the time, and, you know, they couldn't move out or, you know, go and make a life of their own. That's what I thought it was, but it's not. That can be it, but then there's more to it, because if you had a mother who abused you, who exposed you to harm and danger, and the trauma ran deep enough, you know, the abuses, you know, were multiple abuses, and you have a certain aspect, like, you know, Pluto in the 12th and opposing, you know, your moon and other planets, because our minds produce offspring and oddities, because our mind does that, then an individual like that, when she is trying to break away from the malignant narcissist mother, she can experience something like an energy that is latched onto her that will not let her go. She could experience chronic health conditions like back pain, something imitating arthritis, and then every time she makes an effort to get free, every time, she's starting to make progress during therapy, or, making spiritual progress, with whatever spiritual path she's chosen, the back goes out, the knees inflame, other health conditions. This actually does happen to people, and people have made the connection between, because what's happening is that there's this psychic entanglement that is happening. I mean, we're psychically entangled to our parents anyway, but when there's trauma and when there's abuse, her hatred, the mother's hatred, the mother's abuses, the mother's own unresolved trauma, and then the trauma that she is inflicting upon, the child. That's all thought energy. That's the stuff of thought. That's thought energy. And thought energy is conscious. If you're familiar with quantum mechanics, I mean, it's conscious stuff. The whole thoughts as things, or as psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove, he has a video that he published recently, and the title is Thoughts as Spirit Entities. That's the title of the video. So if we can produce all of this, and, we're dealing with a sensitive individual, I mean, someone with their moon in the sign of Cancer, and with Pluto opposing from the 12th house, or their moon in Pisces, with the same opposition, I mean, that individual is going to be very sensitive. That person is going to be empathic, an HSP, a highly sensitive person. Whereas if, we were dealing with an Aries person where, okay, I was abused, all these horrible things happened to me, and I'm a little, messed up, but, I can function. I'm not going to be, a punching bag for the psychic realm. And individuals being able to target people who have this sensitivity, yeah, you try to make progress, you try to move forward, you try to do things to free yourself, and then the resistance can show up as demons, can show up as spirits, can show up as psychic attacks. Psychic attacks meaning that you just had an encounter, with the mother or the incubator, not a real mother, because of the things that she allowed to happen to you, the things that she did to you. You have an encounter with her. And when you leave, you can't get out of bed for 4 days. It doesn't even have to be from that individual. If you're just a sensitive individual, maybe you're like a friend of mine who's a massage therapist, and if she does work on a person who's carrying negative energy from who knows where. As a matter of fact, I know a couple of massage therapists who have this problem where they can't work with certain people, or if they go ahead and they don't listen to their intuition and end the session, they pay for it. They pay for it because these energies that exist, these spirits, these demons, these hidden enemies, from the 12th house, from the unconscious, They siphon energy. They feed on the vulnerable. That's what happens. That's what people experience. And psychology tells us this. Quantum mechanics tells us this. The Dr. Rupert Sheldrake talks about morphogenic fields. And the scientific community, they don't want to accept these doctors, and they write them off as charlatans and quacks. But you know what? I believe that the scientific community has become like a church, like the Vatican. But that's a whole other video. So, quantum mechanics, morphogenic fields, psychology. People are having these experiences. I mean, these are Berkeley and Harvard educated psychologists talking about this. And then there's a scientist. His name is, he's the author of The Biology of Belief. Bruce Lipton. Bruce Lipton went to one of these snake handling churches, and he talks about it in his interview with Rupert Sheldrake. He went to one of these churches in the South somewhere, and he sat with and studied these people who handle these snakes. And the truth of the matter is that most of the people don't get bit, and when they do get bit, most of them don't die. That guy that made the news a few years back, when he got bit by one of the snakes, that's not usually what happens. That's not usually what happens. What usually happens is they don't get bit. If they do get bit, they just recover. And he does a whole interview with Rupert Sheldrake talking about, this collective, that these people are able to jump around and, just go into these trance states with their, Pentecostalism, and create an atmosphere and create an energetic field where nobody gets hurt. And if they do get hurt, the belief and the environment, because there's everybody else's belief. And these people, they don't get bit, or they don't get sick, they don't die. And anybody else that got bit by that same snake, forget it. I mean, it would be over. So this is just a rant about the 12th house. I mean, I know it's all over the place, but I want to do more videos about this because there's a lot that isn't discussed, online about, the 12th house and spirits and entities and demons and thought forms. All of this stuff, all of it is stuff of the 12th house. It's stuff of the unconscious. It's stuff that is created from thought energy. And as for the massage, I want to mention Reiki. There are a lot of stories of people who are walking around who have been affected by, negatively affected after a Reiki session. I know this because it happened to me personally, and I know of other people who are writing about it online. You have this new age mentality where everything is love and light and rainbows, and then, you're carrying your own trauma, you're carrying your own, God knows, what are they doing? What kind of, spiritual practices are these people doing? You've got all of this, and then you go and you work on people who are coming to you because they're out of balance or they're ailing, and then all you do is dump all of your crap onto them. and then they end up worse. So they end up getting attachments, you know, or hauntings or whatever. I know this sounds crazy, but why are the psychologists talking about it? Why is Dr. Rupert Sheldrake talking about it? Why is Bruce Lipton talking about it? Why did Jung talk about it? Was Jung crazy? Are all the Jungian psychologists and analysts out there, are they all crazy? All those people at the Jungian Society, are they all insane? Or is this real and something that, you know, status quo science, the scientific community, just doesn't want to deal with? Anyway, this is one of my, I'm going to do a lot of videos about this because this has affected me personally, and I see other people talking about it, and when the scientists are admitting it and talking about it, and then they're getting like, you know, they're doing the same thing that the church did. They're calling them their own names for heretic. He's crazy. Put him on the quack list. And so many of them. Dr. Larry Dossey, be careful what you pray for, you might get it. I believe that's the title of one of his books. His first book was Healing Words. Healing Words. Anyway, I'm going on and on. This is my 12th house collective unconscious rant, and I will do more, speak more on this topic whenever I can. Whenever. Bye.